Welcome to Sage 300 online training for advanced inventory management. Amanda here from marketing, and today William Woolmer, our Sage 300 expert, will be taking you through the module, and we'll also cover some inventory extensions. Take it away, Will.
Good morning all, William here. So today's intention is to run through a number of areas in inventory management. It's a large module with a lot of attachments and different ways that we can use it. So we're just focusing on these agenda points that we've sent out today. We will have some time for Q&A at the end. That can be used for, what the heck did I mean when I said something, or you may have some specific queries. Like always, a lot of those queries can be exact design problems for your own issues, which you may need to go back to your consultants for. But hopefully we can knock off some queries as well today. So first thing I'm going to go through looking at some of the inventory optimization tools. There's some default features inside inventory which aren't well used or aren't used by a lot of clients. So it's worth looking at to seeing what's already in the box. We'll also touch on what's not in the box. There's a couple of tools that we may use to make inventory more accessible, which are additional modules. I'll also touch on costing methods. I know that whenever you're running Sage already, you already have your costing methods set, and you probably most have got a fair clue on what they're doing and why in a costing sense, but it never hurts to either revisit or understand the several choices that Sage offers. It's actually mildly deep, but we'll touch on it and at least refer to it. Then we'll also look at pricing, a similar thing. It's got a reasonably sophisticated pricing options. And so we'll look at some of the core parts of that. It's not everything, but we'll certainly look at how pricing can be constructed when it's, of course, a combination between several modules doing the work to give us a price. I'll also, along the way, I probably won't do it at the end, but along the way, I can't help myself. As I go, I'll show you the inquiry screens, which include the core inquiries inside Sage's inventory module and the ops inquiry module. And it's not actually an item point here, but I'll also go through another third-party module which provides some other inventory features. So to get right to it, if I throw myself into Sage now. So firstly, let's look at inventory optimization. In inventory, there's reorder quantities. The reorder quantities allow you to run a report and indeed to create automated purchase orders based on minimum maximum stock. So if you have an item, here's one we made before, it may have a minimum stock and a maximum, and these are the quantities that we reorder them in units of. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. It does have different period options in here. So what this allows us to do is specifically have different stock levels for different times of the year. You might have a simple option where in period at the beginning of the year you have a higher stock quantity, and then maybe it's winter, and in the middle of the year you need lower stock. So per month, essentially, you can create a different stock order quantities, and they can get used inside the sales projection reports and the reorder reports, as well as the inventory reorder concept itself. You can also create reordered quantities at a single location. So different locations and different offices can have different locations, which makes sense. If you go all locations, it only allows that if you don't have anything specified. That means that we only set the quantities once. Okay, so that's the core reorder report, that the reorder screen that we're working to. Inside Sage's setup, if you're looking at the optimization tool, there's this small screen under options, which allows you to put in some detail. So the sales periods here that we see are the number of periods that you look at when running an optimization. An optimization is look at sales, how have we gone, and adjust my reorder quantities for me. So we don't see most using this. If they do want to adjust order quantities, a lot of clients would rather manually control it. For instance, export the information out, consider it themselves and push it back in. But if you do wish the system to have a crack, you tell it how many sales months you care about. You can update the location details. If you do that inside the location information for each item, we have an extra field which tells you the reorder quantity. And it's really held for reporting, and you can push that through as well when you're running the optimization, which I'll come to. Also, the minimum and maximum margins. So they're used to allow us to see the rules that are used. If I just drop into here, this is the Sage Help, which most would know is now fairly much all online. And so if we see the minimum, maximum, as we can see these fields, the number is used to calculate the maximum quantities. So for instance, I grab the number, which might be 2, times it by the minimum, optimal, or minimum. So it's just the maximum is just a factor of the minimum. And would you believe the minimum is allows it to reset the minimum, and it uses this style of rule where it grabs the average sales and times it by the minimum. So often the minimum might be 1. I do not want anything less than my average sales, but you might say, oh, I need a little more than that as the minimum. So your maximum might be 3 times, your minimum might be 1.2. So as you see, I lean on the help for that, and we don't use this so often that it's burnt into my mind. Okay, so that's the setup, and that of course can be changed as need be. The optimizer itself, now we've got quantities and a setup, is over here on this screen. You pick it up for a range of items and obviously a range of locations, so you can just force it for one location, so usual sort of nice selection. And then hit the go button, the F7 key. And what it does is reads your data. Now, this itself is nearly useful, okay, because what it's doing is just from an inventories database point of view, pulling out items, a little bit of data about their category and so on and so on, but then pulling out some quantity information, which is available in your location screen. But then continuing across, it's giving us average sales. And remembering we asked for 6 periods worth, so it's gone back. So 6 previous periods to the date that we specify here. And it's saying, there's all my sales. Now that's pretty empty. This is sample data. So if I push it back a little bit to where there may well be some data, maybe even 2019. Sample data is never up to date. It's one of the rules of ERP systems. So here's one with a little bit of data. So there's across the periods, there's some sales giving you an average, and there's a trend and so on. So it also has a lead time function, which it picks up out of your location details if you push it in there. And it says, what have we currently got and what's optimal? So what it's doing is taking the average sales, timesing them by that factor of 1, saying there's the minimum. Now it's coming up with 0, I believe, because currently we have no minimum for that period. So a lot of this, the proof is in the testing. We run it through your test system and push some data through to allow you to see valid results. It also gives you information based on those minimums. So if you had it's saying, I want to, my current minimum, if I needed to catch up to it, this would be the cost of it. So it's trying to tell you how much you have to spend to restock to your minimums and your maximums. So you can see it's trying to do quite a lot for us. Obviously my data is a bit average, so it's not coming up with much for me. But the point being that once you've accepted any of these, and you can edit them, of course. So you might say, I wish to edit this one because obviously empty at the minute. I would like this to update, and where was that update? So you can actually create new figures in the system here and accept that as being one you want to change. So it's got this whole yes, no, you can do that as a range. And then you hit apply. What apply will do is it'll actually change the quantities back on those original fields. Now, of course, it can do that for a range all at once. So that's the beauty of it. The other note is that the report, this essentially is, if you like, an on-screen query which turns into a report, and you can export that. So we find that that's useful. I've got a couple of clients who've said that they will run this, but then export it. Chew on it themselves. They can import it and then just hit update, or they might want to go across and then manually or by import optimize their minimums just one by one. So this is the screen and what it does. Once you've finished with one location or range or category, you then clear and then you can restart the exercise. So you can pick up one at a time. There's no requirement to do it as a single exercise once. Okay, so that's the optimized tool. And yeah, just confirming that its role is to update the reorder quantities. Along the way, I mentioned that the location details have some information which you may not fill in at the moment, but it could be of some use. So per item, per location, and that's why it's in the location screen, because there's multiple locations, you have this lead time available. And so the lead time is in days, number of days it takes, and this is the minimum. Notice that 10, it did get updated. That came from that previous screen that I just typed into. Okay, so you're allowed to use these. They will be reflected on that real optimized screen. They'll also be able to be used. Essentially, I see this as a data store. I find the most use is people pulling this information out, either in a report, a standard report, maybe a customized report. But if it's only occasional, you might as well just push it into Excel. It's reasonably flat, and then there you've got that information. Another point about the reorder process is I mentioned that you can reflect these reorder quantities in automated purchase orders. So if we go down to the purchase orders module and look at the create purchase orders, look at requisitions, the current requisitions in the screen, and create some POs from them, which most wouldn't use. They might use a more fully fledged requisition module, but you can do it as a range. Create them from orders. So if your orders are you buy to order, then you can sit in OE, create all the sales, and then come in here and order those in. Or this is where I'm hitting the create POs from IC. So we look at inventory. What's that mean? The minimum maximums. So this screen here will gives us a reasonable amount of control. So for a range of vendors and items, obviously we are ordering items, so we need to know who owns who we buy those items from. So in the inventory, there's a vendor set up, or up to 9 vendors set up. Normally people creating POs automatically might focus on vendor 1, but you make the choice there. And so if the vendor sits inside this range and they're number 1, they'll be selected, which is everyone. Only order those below minimum, or only order those below projected sales for, say, 90 days. So it looks at the existing sales and says, well, in the next 90 days, that's the projection I'm going to have. And then order up to the maximum is classically, you wouldn't want to go above the maximum. That's what it's for. So this might be a more standard choice. Anything that's too low, fill it up. Okay. You can also, as you can for many selections in Sage, choose the optional field selection method, where you've gone into inventory per item, given them some master fields. And it might be you have a lead time concept, so short, medium, long, and so I'm ordering all the shorts, or I'm ordering all the chemical class A's. So you could use that as a category if that was indeed a proper category, but notice that not every selection criteria is in here. So you might want to grab that by looking at the optional fields themselves and having an ordering category. So then we can create the POs from that. So that's a couple of the elements that are associated with the item and their reorder functionality. All right, I'm sure that raises as many questions as it answers. Okay, I will shout out now to the Sage Inventory Advisor, which is the notice SIA written against these fields here. They allow you, that means Sage Inventory Advisor, it needs these fields, so they were placed in the system to allow it to work well. I can't make that wider, but we use them ourselves, as mentioned. So Sage Inventory Advisor also needs this lead time and a separate minimum per location, so they've put that in. Sage Inventory Advisor is a third, well, it's an advanced module from Sage, which runs on the web. So it's web-based, if you like, cloud-based. It links back into your local Sage data. So there's a process here just to set that up. It's all Sage aware and compliant, so we don't have to do any manipulation of data. It digs in and reads and understands your purchasing history, sales history, adjustments and all that, and then allows us to interrogate your data so that you can see what, as for instance, here's a dashboard, looking at where your overall stock and holdings are, and you can drill down in Sage Inventory Advisor. And obviously you can do stock forecasting, and we have the ability, of course, to create orders. So you can push back into Sage the purchase orders that you defined in here. So that's not the intent of this session to go through this. If you're interested in it, you can pull quite a extensive amount of information off the web about it, videos and so on. But at the moment, I'll just mention that it does exist. It's a component of Sage 300, but lives on the web, which gives it a lot of flexibility in its reporting, as you would expect with modern web tools. Okay, I've mentioned location details briefly, and now I'm going to look at costing methods as well. Okay, so when we create a Sage item, of course, they're associated with core elements as category and account set code. The category is used for the cost of goods sold and for reporting and categorization. And the account set code is the grungy debit when you apply stock. It's where the stock lands in the balance sheet. Account sets themselves have an important concept that they hold. If I just open up the master for that. And that is, what is the costing method? So of course we've got all the accounts that are associated with it, which is nice that you can have several account sets, which means we can have several balances of stock. So we might put, if we have consignment stock, we might put it in its own account set so we can see it separately on our balance sheet, because it doesn't really want to live with our trade stock and so on. But the costing methods is what I want to shout out to here. So we have a number. So broadly, moving average, which of course is the core common method for most. Buy one at $10, buy one at 100. The average is whatever that might be, $55. And when you sell it, the $55 is assigned as the cost of goods sold. The FIFO, first in, first out, rare but possible. LIFO, feasible but against the accounting standards. That will increase the cost of goods sold, which I think tax officers don't like around the world, not just Aussies. So FIFO, if you need to use it, you'll know and be telling us. But essentially, it will track independently each receipt. So if I receive one a day for 10 days, all at different prices, and on the 11th day sell one, it tracks separately and sells that first one at that first price, ignoring all the other costs. So you can see that the system does actually have the ability to track individual receipts. It's at the receipt level. If I receive 10, it's a bucket of 10 at a certain cost. And once I've run through that bucket down to 0, then it moves on to the next receipt. Standard cost allows us to nominate a preferred cost of goods sold, which is classic accounting. So if you do use standard cost, the system allows you to, at the time of sale, sell an item, and you reckon it's 20 bucks, that's what it costs you to build it. Fine, 20 bucks it is, and that goes to the cost of goods sold. So, you know, income on one side, COGS on the other. And the stock, however, at the time you buy it, so let's say you buy an item and you value add slightly to it, and then you have a standard cost of 20 bucks. The item cost you $12. When you purchase it, the item will be valued at $12, which is the accounting process. So of course, the moving average cost is applied to it in your balance sheet as you hold it. And if you never sell it, we'll never see that $20 come through. But it's the time of sale, we have a $20 cost of goods sold. It was 12, so it picks up the 8 and puts that to the clearing account for that. So you can then have that as an adjustment in a single figure. So that $8, you then manage that from an accounting point of view in the GL. Most recent cost. So it will actually pick up the most recent cost of the item. Normally that's from the purchase orders module. It could be the receipted cost, or it could be the invoiced cost. If there's a difference, it picks up the invoiced cost. So that is used across the whole. Now I can see that can overvalue your stock as well. So I'm madly giving no tax advice. That might not be a valid way of costing your stock, although it is at the time of sale again that it costs it. So use the specified. At the time of sale, you get to override it, which is useful or needed, in fact, for non-stock items. So if you have a non-stock item, labor or freight charge, at the time that you sell that freight, that's a better example, you cost it. So you say the freight cost you, customer, 55, and if you wish to at that point, you say that cost me 20, or might cost you 55. Serialized and lot, so serialized and lot account sets, so it's actually using the unique serial of that unit or the lot of that group. All of these and this detail, if you come into this screen and press F1, you get to see it far better spoken than I just did here. So you can get to read about each of them, and there's quite a bit in there, and examples and all sorts. So you don't have to just try to recall whatever I said. So I do recommend, if there's any interest, you might want to cost most of your stock at average, and some small amount of it. It might be that you have a reason to have standard cost, but not for everything, only for those things you internally value add to with a light manufacture process. So you can have a corner of your stock at standard cost. Read all about it. There it is. And once you've read all about it, my suggestion is whip over into your test company, create the setup, and run some through. So yeah, don't discount the help. It's reasonably full. Righto. Those costings, as I mentioned earlier, also push into the item. So if you go to the item location details, you see per location, which most of us would be using here and there, you may be using this field. So this field is where we keep that 20 bucks. Beauty. Now I can see it cost me 29, so I think my standard cost should be a bit higher. Okay, righto. There you are. Look, I'm a cost accountant. I've just done my day's work. So that's a very light version of what they actually do. Apologies to all the cost accountants out there. Oops. Alrighty. So apart from this, what else can I say is that the standard cost, if you're not using standard costing, which is the most common is that we're using average. There's a spare field, which is a cost per item per location. Absolutely useful. So you may want to put in what you reckon it roughly should be, and then you can compare that with a report in case this is going wild. Now, there's other stock reports which will help with that, but you could push this out and push it over here. The standard cost, the value of it is it's static. It doesn't jump around. So the cost will not move until you move it. And you can use it to keep a handle on wild average costs, because as we know, it goes to the wrong location, it's the wrong item, someone punched in the wrong number. There was an issue with the PO and it was overcosted and we had to get a refund or whatever. So all of the average costings may move around and not be as accurate as you want. So you can use this to help you manage that. That's where it lands for us. Okay, all right. Moving on. I do tend to get excited by that. I'll move on to pricing now. So we're looking at the pricing model. First comment was that there is a wide pricing model, and I'm not going to go through the whole pricing concept. Broadly, you create separate price lists and assign them to items. Once you've assigned them inside the item pricing model, there's, I think, quite a generous amount of choices in there. Whether you're pricing it at one unit or in multiples, so if I sell for 10, this is the price, or base it on a cost. You have the concept of sale price, which is hurry for this month only type of sale. So for a period and until this date, from this date, it's this special price. You've got markup. If you're using markup on a cost, this is how we grab it. And you've also got discounts. So now we've got a price to sell it at. Now I can discount it or mark up, but only discount. You can discount it by a figure, $1, unusual. You can do it by percentage, common. Righto, discount on volumes, not a bad way of doing that. So if you sell up to 1,000, that's the discount. Over 1,000, that's the discount. This one's all not filled in. Or classically, you might discount based on customer type. So if you whiz over to the AR module, customers have a type A to E, and that's where it gets triggered. So a customer type C gets 5% discount on whatever the calculated price was. Nice. Some price checking, so you can do some price checking, warning and error and so on, and it's got percentages. Broadly, that's the pricing model, which obviously we have multiple price lists. Now you can see this is a multi-currency company, and you have to have a price list per currency code because Canadian ain't Australian dollars, so they have to be very different. But of course, we have multiple price lists depending on like retail versus wholesale, et cetera, et cetera. At one client who had a price list, or actually several, per customer, because the prices are so unique and crazy that every customer had to have their own. Which is a segue to the next thing, but first I'll just shout out to copy items. So you can copy the pricing from one price list to the next. It's reasonably flat, but it does do it. And you can update, not commonly used because it's essentially based on a percentage. Make this range of, say, this category for this price list code, update it all by 5%. Often that's a bit too blunt for clients' use, but you could, there it is. But I was mentioning single prices per customer. That's what I'm meant to be talking about today, contract pricing. So pick a customer, there's one we made before, and pick an item. You know where I'm going here. Oh, look at that. Why make my life harder than it needs to be? So I'll pick up, this is a US customer, so notice it's a USD, so it's only giving me US price lists. All right, so then I can calculate for this item a price. So classically, the type of price would be just for that customer. So let's just stick with that. Use lowest price. So if the sale price, hurry this month only, is lower than this contract price, give it to them, or not, because that's what a contract price says. We agreed that's the price, too bad, buddy. So you're cool, but classically that might be ticked. And you can either calculate it, or which is using the customer type E, for instance, which means that it works out that that's a 10% discount off the base price. Notice that changes, whereas if I'm base, it's 38. Or I can say, no, it's a fixed price. So we have done a deal, and for the next year, so from now until the end of, you're only going to get $29 price, but only you. Now, and only for that one item. Now, immediately we all think, great, this is quite useful. You might have certain ranges that you do contracts on because you have to be competitive. The industry is really tight in that category. So that's across a range of big customers. You have an agreed price, which is quite different to the rest of your price list. You might just have a price list. It may be simpler to have a price list where those items are specific and you apply that to those customers. But that might not work when you've only got 10 unusual items that you move in and out. So then you manage it with this. If you've got 500 customers and 20 items, that's going to hurt. So of course, do one manually, save it, then export them, understand it briefly in Excel, fill it out in Excel from pulling out, say, the item master list, fill it out, and then push it back in with an import. So you can certainly update this without having to go one by one. But it's essentially designed for a one-by-one style is the common use. I will call out the can-do categories. So if you arrange your categories well, and you have a category called specific, whatever it is, you can pull that whole category out and give it a discount or whatever it may be based on you apply a certain price. Okay, so contract pricing is quite useful inside inventory for point pricing, I like to call it. Volume discounts, I meant to mention, I have actually called that out. I'll just repeat that to make the point that discounts based on volume. There we go. So I actually did call it out, and that's a reasonably useful way of doing it for when you want to get a different price if you sell 100. Where do these prices show? In order entry. So when you do a sale, it applies these rules at the point of order entry. Okay. Yep. Okay. There's also a range of reporting which supports the pricing information, and pull it out of the standard reports. I don't mind exporting it. I'm a big fan of just give me some flat data in Excel. It's not too horrible to look at. If you do export the pricing, it's the second tab you're interested in. There's a little hint. Kitting BOMs. All right, so just briefly, because I am running out of time, it's a classic core area of Sage. So I'll just sort of call out the core functionality. So kitting creates an item. So it's an item that you make up. It's a fake item. These 3 real items on my shelf, I'm selling them in a kit called Easter Basket. So that's the name of the item, Easter Basket. And that item then doesn't exist as a stock item. It's only for sales purposes. It can have a price. So then you can whack your kitting item into your item price lists. Of course, it's only for Easter, so it expires when that finishes. So essentially, kitting is a sales concept, and the bill of materials, which we mentioned also on our list of talking about for pricing, the bill of materials itself takes multiple items, again on your shelf, and builds another true item. So you take 17 pieces of electronic stuff, weld them together using clever people, and you've got a new thing which you sell as a thing. So bill of materials is more about light manufacture. It pulls those pieces together, takes one out of each of those, might be more than one, builds your master item, and takes each of the costs using your costing method, and pushes that onto your master item as well. Your master item exists as a true item, which is available for stock take and all the normal true item stuff, including pricing. So in a classic bill of material, if you're doing like manufacture, you're not normally selling the individual widgets, so they might not be present in a price list, but the master item would be. Okay, transaction inquiry screens. Well, I have, as I promised I would, one of the core inquiry screens is location details, which is classic. That's where we sit a lot of the day to pull out information about what's on hand and some costs of it. Another core screen, which most use, but some probably not all members of your staff might know about it, is inside the item history and inquiry, stats, is this one here. So it's just sort of buried amongst a sea of grey icons. So if you don't know about it, it's certainly Sage's fault, not yours, because it's a very boring place to hide it. What is it? It's a transaction history screen. So as you'd expect, it pulls out history. It allows you to access it by item or location or account set. So if I just pull all items on all locations, you can see that it's showing me all location ones first. And then if you whiz down a mile away, it starts showing you the other locations. So watch out for that, because you might just be looking for all the information on A1030. You have to go down further to find it. So if you were trying to just analyze one item, set your query up to do that. And now I see all locations. That's all very nice and useless. So just hit details, and then it will show you why we're here. This is the money shot. Make it bigger because it's free to do. If you can control your screen, which I can't. There we go. Put that there and that there. So excuse me for having a screen moment there. Righto, so what's it doing? From the oldest to the newest, ins and outs. All right, and it does go back to day dot. If you have ancient data, so be it. Press end on the keyboard to go down to the bottom of the list. Okay, so we had a receipt, and there's the day end, number one. Isn't that great? And so this is the audit trail for it. And if you've got a document with a drill, then it will allow you to drill back to the original document. I got 55, and it cost me 1,500 debit in the original in Aussie. This gives Aussie no, I think it's actually a Canadian company. My apologies. So it's Canadian, but it cost 1,163 in US back in the day, and there's the rate. So these are all the movements, in, out, or mainly in, and then a little bit of out. So that's interesting. This one here was an adjustment. You can see a receipt adjustment, so an extra $8 went on, but that was in Canadian because it wasn't a US adjustment. But that was done on the receipt document. No, it didn't do a manual adjustment, and so on. So I find that quite useful. You read it like a book, and you can work out what's gone in and out. Okay, again, you can also report on that, so you can print or export that subscreen. Quite a few other inquiries here too, but that's the one I wanted to shout out to. Now we jump across to Ops Inquiry. So Ops Inquiry is an additional module inside Sage. It comes with inventory. Not every client uses it. If you're actually running through inventory data much, I do recommend that you have it running. If it's not in your system and you can't find it, just grab your consultant and ask how to get it running. It's got a number of inquiry screens, not all as well used as the first one, but certainly well worth looking at. Item Inquiry allows you to see a wealth of information on one item in one screen. So for those who use it, this is ho-hum. I will mention it can be quite slow if you've got large data and slowish network. It's a bit heavy because it's pulling a lot of stuff together. But it's not dramatic. It depends on your own circumstance. So what? It tells you all information like units, tax. This is the vendor screen, so it tells you everything. This is the pricing models that you've developed, or you can see it took a moment to build that out. It's going away, and it's putting it in one place so you can see all of the price lists at once, which you really can't do very easily elsewhere in Sage. And you can say, this is my base prices. What's going on here? It's in yen, I assume, but it says dollar. So you'd go dig in, what is that trying to tell us? Okay, so that's really great. The discounts that are available, because the pricing model has discounts, so it shows those separately. Bloody, bloody, blah. That reorder quantity information, look at that, sweet. And sales orders at the minute. What do we got on sales order? What do we got on POs at the minute? Again, you can get this from other places, even that location detail screen, but this is nice. And it shows you all the bucks and what's going on. Trans, this is the transactions in a different way, the same stuff we were looking at before. That's exactly the same. It does it by location again. Lots of information. I quite like it. It's got quite a bit there for you to read about. Customers, who bought what? Don't tell you why, but it'll tell you what, and the document they bought it on. And there's it in summary, because that was all too hard. Okay, so that summarizes it by period. So the customer 1100 bought this much in this period, and so on. There's total sales by period. So that's a sales report, but just a lump, but it's only for one item. So this is quite exciting stuff, but it's for one item. So it's not like your monthly report to your sales team. This is not that. Quantity available and so on. But this is, I think, the single most useful screen in this tool. It allows you to see the movements in your stock like an old-fashioned stock card, in, out, end of month, in, out, end of month. So again, by location, it does it by period. The beginning of fiscal period 1, you had none. Well, that's sensible, because that's where we started. We got 55, so over here at the end, we have 55. So it's got an opening and a closing. For those not using this, this is revolutionary, because it makes things damn easy to see. So I can look and say, well, at the beginning of this period, it only shows periods with movement. At the beginning of this period, I had 200, something happened, and now I've got 100. And the something is wherever that is. So you have a look at it. So I find that quite exciting. That's just me. Alrighty. Yeah, so if your clients, if your staff aren't using it, there's a ton of stuff. You can also get rid of some of the stuff. So it's too much, you can actually, in the security, remove things, especially things like costs. So if costs aren't available to people, you can turn those down. Okay, so the other moment I've mentioned, like key things if you've done nothing else, is there's a quantity available report, which is quite nice. It tells you how much quantity is on hand in a location. It's quite flat and slick. So I just mentioned that. Alrighty, so that's the inquiry screens that I meant to show you. Okay, and just quickly, I'll also mention this tool here, Tayrock's productivity tools. It's made by the people, I mentioned at most demos, so for those who've seen or talked with me before, really no apologies. You should hear it again. Tayrock's is in Canada, we forgive them. And the guy running it is one of the core architects of the original Sage 300. When they first moved it across into Windows, he was right there in amongst it. And then he got sick of being in corporate and decided to run his own business, because he could probably do better there. And he built a suite of fancy tools to add on and rub into Sage. And so everywhere he saw it could be better and batchier and bigger and stronger, he built them. And then they have a whole range of little tools put together in a suite called productivity tools. And it includes things in the GL and so on. So you can go up, this word is quite unique, Tayrock's, just drag that off the web and it will tell you about it. I'm just going to mention inventory control as an example. The extended inventory items. It's the inventory item screen. So this is the standard screen, but with some funky buttons. So like copy. So copy this item to another item. Press the go and it would do it. That was easy. Change the name, okay? And then what else do you want to change? Well, the name is held. Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the warning. You have changed, do you want to change the item price descriptions? Okay, so no, but then I'll do it now here. So if I press update after changing and saving a name, it allows me to change that same name in other places. those using Sage pricing will know the pricing descriptions are not kept in the same field as the standard price, standard item description. So this will sort that and solve that. If you want the same descriptions all across that, select all, hit process. Thank you very much. Is that hard? Okay. So item by item, you have this sort of feature and all of this stuff. So this is starting to look useful. Like for this item, there's the vendor details, there's the customer details, there's the item pricing, and it's all there waiting for you to, leap to. And it's clever enough to put the item number in that screen. Now, a lot of clients will use inventory when they build new inventory items. They will build out an item using the wizard, which is exactly what it's for. And I think it's a very sexist name for a tool, but calling it a witch is probably not good either. Mage, maybe. So you pick your item, and then this wizard steers you through screen after screen after screen of all the things you want. A couple of notes, it's linear, so you have to go through all the screens. So you want screen 4, you've got to go through them. And of course, it's a bit invisible until you get there. To some extent, Tayrock solves that by giving you these as choices, so you can go through. One other call out, copy items. If I select some items to copy, okay, and press copy, so I've picked a particular item, but I could choose a particular range. So let's choose all items. I select them. So what am I doing here? I've just pressed a button called copy items. I've chosen a whole lot of items, but I don't want to copy these few or this category or this crazy additional criteria that I've thought of. So these selection criteria inside the Tayrock's tools are stunning. They're amazingly detailed. So you can really nail one group of items from your big messy lists. You include the ones you want, then you press copy. And here's where some magic happens. For those running multiple companies which hold similar items, you can update them in one and copy the poop across to another one. And you can just update only if you want to keep control, because you don't think that they should already exist over there and you're just updating some things. You can just do the description. You can do the core information on the item, which is all of the detail like pricing and so on, copy vendors and to this company and go. So that will update a range of companies. So that's what these copy tools trying to do, as opposed to this one, which is updating internal within Sage. Okay, so I'm not pulling out many of the other tools inside Tayrock. There are over 50 of them now. And this is just one thing they do. They do other tools and concepts as well. But if you're working with items, it's quite useful. Even this fixed valuation errors, you can't do everything, but it's fairly functional.